We're going to get started in 1 minute.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. You are at the Planning Board meeting, May 23rd, 2023. First order of business is actually to consider approval of the April 25th, 2023 regular meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for that?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the April 25th, 2023 regular meeting minutes as written.
Thank you. Do I have a second? All right, and any discussion on the minutes? None? Okay. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. That passes unanimously. For public comments, the only folks that have signed in are actually the applicants for item 4B. So next up would be the action agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I wanted to disclose that our company was involved in the planning and rezoning for this next case, so I feel there's a conflict of interest.
I make a motion that Jay Henson be excused.
Second. Any discussion on that? No, okay. All in favor of recusal? Any opposed? None, okay. Okay, so now with the first item on the agenda, we'll consider making a recommendation on petition R23-03. That's Ultimate Athlete. It's a request by Jeremy Martin to rezone approximately 1.29 acres located at 15901 Kramer Drive from neighborhood center and general residential to highway commercial conditional district. Mr. James.
Petition for approximately 1.29 acres to rezone that parcel from neighborhood center. A small portion of that to the west is a little piece of general residential. It's been recombined. That would all be proposed for a highway commercial conditional district. And the kind of the whole idea and reason behind the rezone is that was approved for indoor recreation, workout center. They wanted to utilize the backyard area for the possibility of some outdoor recreation, passive area. So that's why we're here for the rezone. Highway or neighborhood commercial does not allow outdoor recreation, but highway commercial does. On the screen, you see the location there along Highway 73. and you see the proposed plan. There's one minor modification for the buffer requirement. The buffer requirement from highway commercial to neighboring residential zones is 30 feet. They have given that along all of the borders except the area along their access easement to the neighboring property to the north. And that would be a 10-foot modification request with some additional evergreen shrubs for that buffering. As far as the 2040 plan goes, that area is considered an activity center, which would allow something of this type of use for commercial use, with that type of activity as an outdoor recreation, with indoor recreation as well. So that being said, that's really all there is with this one. Staff does recommend approval. It does meet the 2040 Community Plan LU 6.1 and EV 2.1, which encourage a mix of land uses and promotes and encourages local and small businesses. Any questions?
Any questions for staff? Scott, go ahead.
Is the applicant going to speak, or is it no applicants?
Do not think the applicant is here today.
That's fine. Jesse, what about concern about noise and light for this outdoor recreation? It's not, again, I don't want to be, I understand we're comfortable with this applicant and what he stated, but as soon as we rezone this, the next applicant, the next operator may not have the same view, so.
Sure. Well, they would fall under the noise ordinance, just like any other business. So if there was a noise complaint, then they could certainly call the Huntersville Police Department for a noise recreation complaint or noise ordinance complaints. The community meeting, which took place months ago, no one came out with concerns with noise. I think that because that parcel's been commercial for so long and the proximity to 73, it just wasn't a concern from the neighboring properties. As far as, rezoning this to highway commercial moving forward, if it spurs other highway commercial, it's got the conditional district attached, so you can look that up case by case. Certainly wouldn't possibly want any highway commercial use, but with this particular use, it didn't seem like an issue.
And light as well, again, he doesn't have intentions to put up an outdoor light, but I'm thinking about the proximity to the residential.
Sure, yeah. There's no proposal for outdoor lighting, so.
Would this open up the door that if I come along the next day and buy it from him, could I go out there and do something different with lighting?
You could propose outdoor lighting. You would have to submit a new lighting plan, which would have to meet our ordinance, which there's not more than 1 foot candle that can bleed over to neighboring properties. So that should cover it. 1 foot candle is not very light. You've got to do, there's no drop lenses. You've got to do horizontal lighting that goes straight down.
Again, I'll defer to staff on that. I just want to make sure we weren't missing something to put some kind of condition on here before we just open it up, so.
No, I don't think so. I think the lighting ordinance covers that pretty well.
That's all.
Just to follow on to that question Scott had, so there's no plan for any, what's the right word, outside, I'll say broadcast, but outside music or sound system outside the athletic center? Or is it all that's inside?
That's all inside. I think their only outdoor proposal, there's not an outdoor recreation area other than a patio. I think they wanted to be able to open some of the doors and just be able to do some light workouts outside. But any loud music, again, would fall under the noise ordinance.
All right. Since the applicant's not here, then I would recommend maybe 1 or 2 things for us. One, that we include that in that question in whatever the motion is, and that answer be provided to the town board about outside sound systems. Okay. That it's there. I attended the neighborhood meeting, and I don't believe there is, but I can't speak for the applicant.
Sure.
In regards to the buffer modification, I know you mentioned it was related to an easement, but can you further explain what that, like why?
Yeah, sure. The easement previously was, it was on the subject parcel, and with this proposed rezone, it actually enhances where that easement is and that access, so it's more to the northern boundary instead of all within that property, so it gives more room for buffering that would have been anyway. So while it doesn't meet the ordinance, the situation with that built environment where it is today should improve with the allowance of more vegetation.
So the buffer would be south of the easement, is that correct?
Yeah, the buffer will be south of the easement now.
And so if it was the full 30-foot, it would encroach on the
Sure.
north? Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff? None? Okay. Do I have a motion for this?
In considering the proposed rezoning application R 23-03 Ultimate Athlete, the planning board recommends approval based on the plan being consistent with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan, policies LU 6.1 and EV 2.1, which encourages a mix of land use and activity centers and promotes and encourages local small businesses to locate in Huntersville. It is reasonable in the public interest to approve the rezoning plan because it is consistent with the existing development patterns in the area, supports the goals set for in the 2040 community plan for activity centers. Lastly, the request modifications of the buffer yard is in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance and therefore supported.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Before I second, did you want to add your amendments or?
I don't think I need to add an amendment to that. I think I just need to ask the staff to clarify that question and provide it to the town board. I think that would be good enough.
And second.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on that? Besides, Frank, your comment seeking clarification. We're good on that? Okay. All those in favor? Do we have any opposed? None? Okay. That rezoning passes 8-0, or I should say that motion. And can I get a motion to bring back Jay Henson?
I'll make a motion to bring Jay Henson back.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? And none opposed, okay. Jay, come on back. All right, item 4B. Yeah, why don't you? Go ahead.
I need to state that I went out of country and early, so I did as much research as I could. I did meet with the applicant of this petition before I left. I didn't promise anything. I just wanted to see as much as I could about the project, so I had an understanding of it, because I only had a day to get ready as much as I could. I only had a day to get ready for this meeting. So I just want to state that I had met with the applicant.
All right. Did you get that shirt while you were in Scotland?
Nay.
All right. All right, so item 4B, consider making a recommendation on petition R 22-07. That's the Town One Mixed Use Center. It's a request by Tree Nail Development to rezone approximately 69.41 acres located at the intersection of Mount Holly Huntersville Road and Hambright Road. It's going to go from corporate business and corporate business conditional district to transit-oriented development residential conditional district, transit-oriented development employment conditional district, highway commercial conditional district, and special purpose conditional district. Mr. James.
Thank you. R 2207, Town One Mixed Use Center, please enter the staff report into record. First off, the project size is 70.54 acres. I think the first plan that came in had the 69.41, so I need to change that on the agenda for the town board. So just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, so Town One Mixed Use is by Treenail Development Incorporated. The project is 7.54 acres. The current zoning is corporate business and corporate business conditional district. There's a conditional district at the corner there you see on the screen. The uses involved the current uses are vacant properties, commercial use, and single-family residential. The proposed zoning, special use or special purpose conditional district, highway commercial conditional district, transit-oriented development conditional district, transit-oriented development employment conditional district. The other one was residential. The proposed uses are mixed use, warehousing, commercial uses, multifamily residential, and office. The rezoning plan for the 4 zones, as you see on the screen, the color-coordinated different zones. There's 19 total lots, so it is a major subdivision. There's a total of 747 multi-family dwelling units, 419,300 square feet of non-residential square footage. The breakdown of that is approximately 126,000 square feet of office, retail of 96,500, warehousing of approximately 172,000, and other 75,000. It would be considered high density for stormwater with 56.9% impervious surface. The open space provided meets the ordinance minimum standards, as well as tree save of 30%. They've proposed 32.7% tree save. And the adjoining property uses, that area is generally light industrial and warehousing, some small retail, gas stations, and some single-family residential. On the screen here is the context map, shows you how this melds in with the other approved plans in the area. You've got the Hambright Trinity Capitol to the west, which is flex space, some athletic fields to the southwest. The big one here is the future Cats Park and Ride, which would be directly across the street, which spurred the transit-oriented development. You've got some more light warehousing, light industrial, and across the street you've got another TOD-R approval with R2004. And I-77 is adjacent to the east. And the Hambright Road, I-77 HOV lane connection there to the east. This is just furthers that context for the surrounding area there along Statesville Road and 115, single-family uses and some education schools. So the public hearing, there's been some revisions since then due to staff comments. The applicant was able to get some of those items revised for this meeting. One of those, there were some clarity issues on how much buffer for grading they needed along the I-77 buffer. That buffer that is required per ordinance is 50 feet. They're providing 50 feet, however, they would like to grade 20 feet into that buffer and add the proper buffering vegetation with that, as well as mitigating. I believe there's one specimen tree in that buffer. The plan previous had 30 feet and 20 feet, so they've agreed that 20 feet is enough. In the public hearing, the parcel that you can see at the bottom on the screen that looks like a triangle, that is a holdout piece of property. They have agreed with notes on the plan to allow for internal access if that ever gets redeveloped. That was a comment by staff. There was some notes on the original plan that called for 60-foot buffer modification along Mount Hollyville Hunters Road in the special purpose district, but the plan showed 40 feet. They have revised that to show an actual 60-foot buffer with some added vegetation to take up for the 20 feet they're asking for. And the new modification request for relief from full frontage requirements for building W2 on Public Road A. That is modification request number 7. So those have all been revised since the public hearing. So there's 7 modification requests, and I'll go through those. The first one, which we have asked for a little more clarification on, is there's a note on the plan and then some notification on the actual plan itself in the site plan that side yard parking is permitted on lots 6, 7, 8, 13, 18, and 19. And then additional screening will be provided in accordance with sheet C5 on the rezoning plan. After review of the revised plan, staff believes that there could be a little more clarification on the site plan itself with possibly a chart showing how much side yard is required and what they're asking for on those given lots, and a little more clarification on some other lots that might need side yard parking. Modification request number 2 is the one previously stated for the grading into the buffer against I-77. Staff can support this request with mitigation in compliance with Article 7.4 and 7.5. Buffer or modification request number 3. Buffer may be reduced on lots 1 and 2 along Mount Huntersville Road to 60 feet. Again, that was one that was on the previous slide. Staff can support this modification as it does meet the intent of the ordinance with the given additional vegetation. And believe there's a screening wall as well. Modification request number 4, along Public Road A, the town allows 350 feet for a cul-de-sac public street. They are requesting 380 feet. Staff is in support of that modification. For modification request number 5, the massing requirements pursuant to ordinance are waived for the building located on lot number 18. So that would be the 2 the 2-story buildings there at the pink at the bottom of the screen. The ordinance requires massing requirements for any building that is, in this case, taller than the adjacent building, which would be the single-family home to the west. So this modification would be to waive that section of the ordinance. As far as staff's recommendation on that, staff can support that modification request, being that this is a transit-oriented development, and the transit-oriented development itself promotes density. We believe that the density at that particular lot and the level of service that is needed for a transit-oriented development, that staff can can recommend approval of that. Modification request number 6 is for vertical parking may serve TODE and TODR portions of the project, and parking may be completed prior to the completion of all the improvements such parking is intended to serve. Staff is in support of this parking deck as it is central to the project, as it provides required parking needed in the district and decreases the need for surface parking. So what they're asking here is if the deck is built prior to the other buildings that the required parking serves, that it would be allowed to do that even if it doesn't meet the ordinance at the time that it is built. Modification request number 7 is for the building on the SP section of the proposed plan, which at the top of the screen, and you can see it a little better in the staff report as well. The building, let me see if I can point it out here. The building is W2, and as you can see, the full portion of the frontage of that building does not front the street. So this modification request would be to only have the architecture meet the road at the portion of the road that it is fronting. Staff does recommend seeing more renderings of what that building could look like. With creative building design, I think we can be, that we can support this request as long as it meets the intent of the building being placed at the street on that corner. So as far as the Huntersville Community 2040 plan goes, this parcel is within the mixed-use center, as you can see on the screen. It's also within an employment center. With the mixed-use center, we think that it really meshes well with what is needed within a mixed-use center with retail, office, dense residential, some flex space that matches the area, and also meets the employment center needs. So we believe that the mix of uses and density supports the 2040 plan. And as far as staff recommendation goes, in considering the proposed rezoning petition R2207 Town 1 Mixed Use Center, staff recommends approval if the remaining comments and conditions and TIA comments are addressed. The proposal is consistent with Huntersville Community Plan policies L1.1, 2, 5.1, 6.1, 7.1, 8.1, 8.3, EV 1.3, T1.2, and T1.3. It is reasonable in public interest to rezone approximately 70.54 acres described herein, as it is consistent with the envisioned use and development pattern set forth in 2040 Community Plan. The proposed rezoning plan meets the intent of the 4 districts requested and applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance together as one development plan in a cohesive manner. That is all I have for that. If you have questions for me, happy to answer them. Also, the applicant and their representatives are here as well.
Thank you, Jesse. Frank, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, some of this may wait till the applicant comes up, but a question to you. What's the applicant's position on the modifications reference staff comments? Do you have an issue? I mean, is there being, this is in works?
I've spoken with the applicants, and after they've read the staff report, believe that they are working on some of those requests, those minor requests. So yes, we're still working together on that.
Okay. I have some other questions, but hope for much later.
Okay, go ahead.
Jesse, on the, well done on the staff report, can you go to item 6 on the modification? I'm sorry, it was me, but I didn't understand the request and the response.
Okay. So in the TODE, and I can actually show. So in the TODE section, that top corner, there's a 7-story proposed parking deck. And I believe what the applicant is wanting approval on here is that if they build, and they can probably add to this as well, but if they, let's say, build that parking deck first and the surrounding uses are not built yet, that they have assurance that they can build that, even though they're maybe going over their parking maximums, with the anticipation that the building.
Modification is, what would, I'm sorry, but what would be the request for a modification be?
As they've put it in their plan, vertical parking may serve TODE and TODR portions of the project, and parking may be completed prior to the completion of all the improvements such parking is intended to serve. So it's kind of a funky one because it's not, it's not needed unless the parking deck is built prior to the buildings that it's supposed to serve.
Sure, okay.
So staff recommends approval because it would highly reduce the amount of surface parking in the future. And
Right. Okay, I follow you now. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, has anybody talked to Mr. Cruz? It just seems like his house is going to be down here, and then we've got a 7-story office building to the right, to the east, and then a 5-story commercial building or mixed use to the west there. I mean, it just seems like it's going to be kind of towering over his house, like a pseudo Thirsty Beaver situation.
Sure. So we've commented on that a lot through the process. I think we've seen 4 different plan reviews, and we've consistently asked that same question. The applicant can probably better speak to that than me, because I think he's attempted and maybe met with them several times.
Yeah, I know he's reached out to him. Yeah, I know you've tried, and he said that he's fine with whatever, do your thing. I just am afraid of how it's gonna look, and that after you build these nice tall buildings, that he's gonna be like, my house doesn't even get sun now. I mean, I guess he's south facing, so he's probably still get the sun that he's getting now, but
I assume you'll have questions for the representatives,
Yeah.
and let's keep that one for
okay.
that.
Jesse, modification number 5, massing requirements. What would the massing requirements be if we didn't do a modification? Like, how does the ordinance address massing?
So I've got that piece of ordinance. It's similar to, do you all remember the hotel in North Cross that we passed with a SUP not long ago? So when you've got a, let's say, 2-story or 1-story building next to a 5, in the past, what the town has done is the perceived massing of that building is reduced. So instead of having 7 floors all the way up, you would have like a break-in and then go up a couple floors, another break-in, pull the front back, maybe have a patio-type element. You'd have, the ordinance speaks to like brick on the bottom with a lighter tone above that. It's just kind of a perceived massing. So that's, like I said, it's very similar to the hotel we did on North Cross, where we worked with the applicant, and the first product was 5 stories straight away, and then they kind of notched some of the stories above it back. They're asking to waive that and be able to do the 7 stories without the massing. Perception. Yeah, so pull that. So at the bottom corner, those are the two 7-story buildings, and that little triangle is a single-family home. So it's really the massing compared to the single-family, not the TOD. Yeah, but we're not, right, exactly, yep.
Can I follow up on Jay's question? 'Cause I too was confused a little bit. But if I understand it now, the deck that is being built could only be built if a adequate commercial building of appropriate size is also built. But that's being built later. So the deck will be built first, and they're wanting to serve usage that a deck that size normally could not serve?
Yes, I think so. So one way of looking at it is, I think that they want some flexibility with their phasing. So if they decide to build the deck before the amount of square footage for the rest of the TOD and TODR is built, but they want to go ahead and get the parking out of the way for the deck, that when they come in for commercial construction plans, that staff doesn't say, what does this parking serve? There's nothing around it. But it's approved in the rezoning plan for the amount of square footage moving forward. So they want that flexibility that they can do the deck before the uses are built out.
Now, not to think that the applicant is wanting to do this, but is there any concern that they may say, we're not going to do the 7-story buildings, and then we're stuck with this deck at that point?
I guess, I mean, that can always, it could be a concern. I don't know why you would do that as far as marketability goes.
Okay. Just thinking, just in case,
Yeah,
you know, if
that's a good question.
approve the modification.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Since this is the first TODE that we've looked at, correct?
It is.
All right. I've got a couple of questions about that article, just to clarify and to go. That is, so this is Article 3.2.14. And in the first paragraph, intent, it states, "The TODE may be located on developable parcels within 1/2 mile catchment area of rapid transit station. The district establishes an employment node within a 10-minute walk," which I'm going to ask a question here. That's the 1/4 mile, right? 10-minute walk? Of a designated transit rapid station that serves the workforce. So based on that reading, and based on going to design provisions of 3.2.14 and then .E.3, design provisions, let me go down there so I don't misquote. Yeah, it says, notwithstanding the height restrictions of Article 4, buildings and lot types, new buildings in the transit-oriented employment district are limited to 7 stories or 80 feet in height, whichever is greater. And then it goes on to talk about minimum building height. So what that says, based on what I read in the intent, is that the 7-story, if you have a bus rapid transit station, you request and you get a TODE put in, that if you can build up to 7 stories or 82 feet, or whichever is higher. In this case, that's 7 stories is, I believe, 110. It has to be built within the 1/4 mile of the rapid transit station, correct? That's the way I read that,
Yes.
because
Yes.
that's the employment node.
Right.
Right. So, but now the question comes, another question comes on the side. How do you, where do we measure from? The center of the transit station or the perimeter of the transit station?
I think you would go at the perimeter of the transit station. Yep.
That's what I was thinking, because this question before, when we had rail transit, it was, the catchment area is a 1/2 mile out. So it's, the 1/2 mile measurement out is from the perimeter. The 1/4 mile measurement, or 10-minute walk, is measured from the perimeter. Correct? Okay. All right, then that's straight. So between,
If I can interrupt for
Go
1
ahead.
second, though. Let's focus on the 10-minute and the reference to the quarter mile. Is that actually accurate
I mean, I think it
the
was
10
an estimate when the ordinance was written
for the employment center?
for the 10-minute walk being a quarter mile.
No, and I believe that's what that Mr. Semino has always said when we talked the master plan downtown. He talked about the 10-minute, we talked about the rail transits. A quarter mile is estimated to be a 10-minute walk, so that you can get to that rapid transit station. I mean, that's the discussions I've heard in the past, and the answers I've heard. I was just clarifying to make sure that's still correct,
Yes.
okay? So let's say, this building, in this case, for this applicant, couldn't be built outside the quarter mile. Although the catchment area is a half a mile out, you would have to build a building within the quarter mile
I
of,
think you would look at it at a case-by-case basis, but in this situation, with it being a major thoroughfare there in I-77, it makes sense to put the density there. If you were, slightly over a quarter or within the quarter and half, but it was a really good product, I think we have the flexibility to.
and I'm not specifically talking about this building. I'm talking about, we have 3 bus rapid transit stations.
I don't
Talking
know
about
if-
how to measure, if someone were, let's say something happened, somebody put somewhere else, I'm trying to understand what are the limitations of where that would go.
Yeah, I think what it's trying to do is gain the density around the transit station and then level it out with, less density as it goes out from the transit station. But I also don't think it was written to be as rigid as, putting a protractor on the plan and saying you're right outside of the quarter, you can't do that. I think it allows a little bit of flexibility, but what you've said is pretty much the spot-on case for it.
All right, and I have something else to say about that, but I think that should be saved until discussion.
Frank, I may be able to help you. If you look at the plan here, if you look at the I-77, just to the left of it says quarter mile radius from transit station shelter. So assuming the designer is accurate in their measurements, they're actually measuring from the shelter and not even from the perimeter. So I think in this case, I know what you're going at. You're looking at the bigger picture. But in this one, I think.
They were given a conservative number for that quarter.
And I don't have a problem with that. I'm trying to say, in general, for all of the stations, in the past, we talked about measuring from the perimeter for the old rail transit stations, not the center of mass. And I just want to make sure that was the same way we were measuring here. So in actuality, you wouldn't get a circle, you would get an amoeba. The shape, the quarter mile would be, right? So,
Right, depending on what the transit
right.
station was. Maybe we could put amoeba in the ordinance. That'd be kind of cool.
Very nice. If I can build on Frank's question. So this situation here where we are talking half-mile catchment for all TOD variations or just TODR? Just
It talks about it in TODR and E.
And so when we do that, and as Frank brought up, I mean, we have Park and Ride on Statesville by exit 23. We have the one on North Cross by exit 25. The one, if we're talking about the one on North Cross, and even if we go from the center of the transit parcel, as the crow flies, it's a half mile to the Barnes & Noble in Birkdale. And so, here he comes.
I just want to caution everybody of thinking about other areas, because this is the case. TOD E here and TOD R as well was pointed out. You can see the quarter mile circle, and then further out, you can see the half mile circle. These are not set in stone. It's generally within this. So as was pointed out, there's a TODR across the interstate that's within a half mile of this that qualified. So I just want to we're completely comfortable with what they've got, what they're doing. It fits exactly what is intended for these. And if it happens at future sites, so be it. So I just want to get that on the record.
Yeah,
Right, and Jack, the reason I asked those questions was not, I don't have a problem with this application. But since this is the first TODE, I just wanted to clarify my understanding to make sure that in the future, if something came up, I fully understood it. That's all that was.
and for me, it was simply because we often try to figure the potential future impacts. And we do have other sites there and those that have been recently discussed as well. Let's see, another question I had, in the public hearing, the TIA was discussed. The level of service currently sitting at a C. And what was stated is that the level of service after improvements are made, the AM peak will go to a D, and the PM peak will go to an E. On the surface, that doesn't make sense because that's after improvements. And so that doesn't necessarily fit the definition of the word, but I'm sure there's a reason why. Can you explain that, please?
Well, the representative from Kimley Horn, I believe, is here, so they can probably speak more eloquently to the TIA than I can. But as far as TIA goes for town needs, a level of service of D or E, and again, this is for the town, it's not DOT standards. So if you looked at downtown, for instance, that would be a level D, I believe, E, downtown. So if you're trying to promote density and slow traffic down, things like that, going from a C to a D to a E, given you're building out TIA improvements that are required for turn lanes and safety, we're not necessarily against that. In a TOD.
Right, and those, I mean, those improvements are obviously warranted, and we deferred to NCDOT on that.
We did. So we haven't gotten that full approval yet, so we can't really dive too much into what exactly the level of service will be. But if it was to the scoping of, and the recommendations from Kimley Horn, we would be in support of that.
Okay, and I have a variation of that question for the applicant when we bring them up.
Sure.
One last one for me, when we talk about building W2 and approximately half of it fronting the road and the other half not, the part that is not, the site plan shows a natural path that goes in front of it. Haven't we, in the past, I can't think of something, commercial application, but multifamily, where we have counted that as fronting if it was a path, a usable path of sort?
Yeah, I can talk on that a bit. So in the past, the town has considered pedestrian paths or greenways or plazas or greens or things like that you could front on. In this case, there's some environmental sensitivity around there. I think the applicant wanted to bring their greenway or their pedestrian paths over to there and front that, but they didn't want to necessarily add more impervious surface to that swim buffer. So I think they just went with the route of a modification to enhance that corner, which I would like to see the renderings of that corner. But instead of putting more built upon area over there, it's a passive, I think they wanted to do a wood chip path kind of thing, more environmentally sensitive next to that area.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Go ahead. No, I've asked questions.
It's just a quick question on the Cats Park and Ride. It's not currently there, right, or being built?
It is not.
Yeah, and what is the timeline on that?
We haven't gotten construction plans in yet. I believe funding has been allocated. I I think the applicant can probably speak to that as they've been discussing that with TIA requirements and things too. But we have not gotten construction plans in, so I don't have like a clear timeline.
I'm sorry, Jesse, I got one more question. I want to clarify. And the staff report that the town board got, it talked about the TODR, affordable housing, that there were at least 2 units there. So there was also some, they didn't have, the applicant did not have to meet some massing requirements in that area also. Does that apply to other zones, or is it just restricted to the TODR because of the affordable housing, or does it extend to other portions like the TODE of the project?
You can use that provision per state statute really anywhere. In this case, I believe it's,
But the reason I asked that question, just because they asked for a there was a request for modification for the massing of the buildings, the TODE.
Right.
But if it applies to the entire project, they wouldn't have to have a modification, would they?
well, it applies to, it would apply to a lot or a building. And what they're using it for is building U1.
Okay.
So in this case, they would have needed to ask for a modification for U1 as well as A1 and A2 on either side of that parcel, but they're given the affordable housing unit, so we cannot use that massing requirement for that, the harmony of the area for state statute.
You answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if no other questions for staff, love to hear from the applicant, or the applicant team.
Come on down.
So as you're aware by now, because you've discussed this a few times, we'll have you do name and address for the public record, please.
Thank you. Susan Irvin, representing the applicant, Irvin Law Group, 19726 Zion Avenue. And thank you all, and thank you very much to staff, not just Jesse, but Brian and Jack, and all the hard work. I would just like to introduce the team that's here tonight. Kristen Mulkey, Bartlett, Hartley, and Mulkey are the architects. Steve Blakely with Kimley Horn is traffic engineer. Peyton Woody with Woodbine Design, our engineer and planner. Of course, Ben Geisler, Tree Nail Development, and myself, Susan Irvin with Irvin Law Group. I would like to just go ahead and hand it off to Ben to start.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks for all your hard work, and particularly for sitting through this tonight. So Jesse did a really good job, so there's going to be some slides in here. I'm just going to touch on a couple little things as we go that are, the slides may be duplicative, but there's a little bit of content I want to touch on. First, though, myself, I've lived in Charlotte area for 15 years. I live in Davidson, develop exclusively north of the lake. And my partner, Joey Logano, has owned a portion of this 24 acres of the 72 acres for about 12 to 13 years. The property's kind of near and dear to him. It's the first land that he bought when he started his NASCAR career, started his family in Huntersville, still owned a number of businesses in Huntersville. And this is a project that we both take a lot of pride in. We're not out-of-town developers coming in and out. And I'll talk a little bit more of that as we go. Jesse talked about the location, obviously on the southern fringe of Huntersville here. One of the things that's kind of unique about the site is it's a combination of the CAT site and the HOV lane. It's one of those few instances where you're looking at placing development around where infrastructure exists to support that development. Jesse has talked a lot about the 2040 plan and the land use principles that support this type of development. When we talk about this mixed-use center, and in particular, as we talk about it overlaid here with that surrounding development that he referenced, I think the really cool thing here is this is the Huntersville 2040 plan coming to life. If you look at development that's happening around this mixed-use center, and then our project coming into it along with Statesville Road mixed use, it's good planning coming to life. From a zoning perspective, we talked about the different zones, but I thought this would be helpful for you to see sort of the tapestry of our zoning, the SP, TODR, TOD, and HC, mixed in with the other two TODR projects that have been approved in Huntersville, number one being Brighton and number two being Statesville Road mixed use. A lot of similarities here in terms of the way the zoning would lay in. Mixed use is a buzzword in development right now for the last 10 years or so. A lot of people have their own interpretation of mixed use. One of the things with our site is by acreage, we are almost 50-50 commercial and residential. And I think that's really important as you guys consider the project. There's some acreage breakdowns there on the left, but effectively all the blue is commercial, all of the green is residential. We do have some overlap. We have some mixed use buildings there in through our pedestrian village. Jesse talked about the square footages on the commercial. I did want to cover off on the residential components. There's actually 5 different product types in here. We really wanted something that had sort of quilt patchwork feel to it. So there's 338 walk-up, 37 townhome, 228 urban flat, 120 condo style, and 24 live work, and they're scattered pretty well across the site. From an economic impact perspective, we're projecting over $250 million in construction benefit to the town of Huntersville, dollars being spent here. That'll generate about $200,000 in value-add tax benefit directly to the town of Huntersville. More importantly, and we've talked to Anthony about this, town manager, based on the valuation of the project at build out, it'll generate over $500,000 a year in additional ad valorem tax to Huntersville. It goes directly into the town of Huntersville budget. Roughly 850 jobs broke out, office, restaurant, warehouse, residential, a good mix there. The affordable housing component, and Frank touched on the 2 units that we're providing to work into that massing provision. As you guys probably are aware, there's no affordable housing requirement in Huntersville currently. We are looking at a total of 7 units. Of those 7 units, definition of affordable housing would be that they're affordable to someone who's earning 80% of the area median income. So one of the things that Joey looks at in everything that he does, early in his career, pushing hard, wanting to win races, wanting to make a lot of money, his wife sat him up one night and said, "Why?" And the why became the Joey Logano Foundation. They donate over $1 million a year on the premise of giving kids a second chance who never really had a first chance. Joey's really passionate about it. He's very involved in it. They have 2 or 3 primary charities, and they do a little bit here and there with some others. As part of that, there are 4 units in here out of that 7 that the Joey Logano Foundation has agreed to basically subsidize to bring that affordability level down to 50% AMI. We believe we're the first developers north of Charlotte to implement 50% AMI affordable housing. Those units will be executed in partnership with Children's Hope Alliance. Children's Hope is Barium Springs, Troutman, if you guys are familiar with the orphanage up there, and they do a lot of work around the area. Those 4 units will be prioritized for foster families or foster kids who have aged out of the program, hopefully successfully, landed a job, but still kind of struggling to get on their feet a little bit. And then having sat through a number of these meetings over the last couple of years, we've also got 2 of those units that we're prioritizing for Huntersville first responders. And at that 50% AMI, in addition to 1 more unit, that's a 15-year commitment being underwritten by the foundation. Will be worked into their annual giving. I'm going to introduce Kristen Mulkey. As I mentioned at the beginning, the project is important to us. Joey has an existing business there, Clutch Studios. It's the largest production studio in the Charlotte Metro, and they're out of space. So actually where this all started was I needed to find somewhere to put the studio. Where we're going to put the studio. He wanted to keep it in Huntersville. One thing led to another, and here we are. One of those flex buildings on the north end of the site will be the future home of Clutch Studios, basically doubling their space. Joey and I intend to go vertical with a number of these buildings together, so we're long-term holders. So for us, the architectural vision and the execution of the project as a whole was really important. We started working with BHM, and Kristen has been awesome, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Thank you very much for having us. I want to first start off by saying it's been refreshing working with a developer who actually cares and has a vision that aligns with ours so easily. So it was easy to kind of develop these renderings and this vision for the center when you're seeing eye to eye with the people that have the money and want to do it. So with that being said, I'm going to check out this little thing. Town One is where basically what we're calling the modern urban meets the modern farmhouse. In truth, it'll be the design and the character and the materials that set them up to work together as it moves from, the office and the super commercial area all the way down to what would be considered just like an apartment or single-family kind of environment feeling. A blend of textures, colors, and materials will help to create that street life and the architecture for an inviting and engaging center overall. Again, everything from the high commercial area all the way down to the residential area. As you move from one area to another, you'll have consistent themes that kind of blend engaging streetscapes, inviting window storefronts, and all of that throughout the center. A sophisticated palette of building materials will bridge that modern Charlotte urban look of glass and metal with the classic board and batten farmhouse, all of it with a sophisticated edge. What we'll do is, again, Charlotte is just down the street. We have this Class A office on the corner as a beacon, and then as you weave your way through the center, you start to step it down with the characteristics and that palette that brings that kind of farmhouse feel. So it's kind of blending the two, the north and the south, together here at Town One. I mean, I'm the architect, but the site and the highlight of this project, I feel like, are the moments that are carved out between the buildings that provide that opportunity for people to meet. I mean, that's really important for us as architects, because a center, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is, if you don't create those moments for people to enjoy and come together, they just aren't successful. You can have a Starbucks or you can have a Caribou, but if it's just like a bad street or there's not a place to go grab your coffee and sit outside, it's just not successful. And so Town One is going to have all those characteristics, the lighting, the engagement, opportunities for food trucks, moments to just kind of come together. And it's seen in the plan as we carve out little zones for this to happen throughout the project. And then basically, last but not least, is the connectivity of this project. And again, Ben and his team, the engineers, the site planning, and all of that have really pushed for these connectivities to happen throughout the project. And again, you mentioned like the W section, where there's a connectivity from like kind of the warehouse district all the way through to that commercial area, because they really truly want people to be able to kind of leave the workplace and go get a coffee or enjoy the residential coming over and having dinner in the evening. So all of those amenities are just going to be apparent throughout this place.
Thanks, Kristen. That does not do service to the amount of work that they've put in at BHM, their whole team down there. Just kind of want to walk you through, and it's a big site, want to just give you, and can I draw right on here, Jesse?
Yeah. Use this feature here and just kind of draw.
Okay. All right, we'll see how quick I can do this here. So the CAT station, there, our main entrance coming in here. These orange buildings would be our urban flats. Coming into the traffic circle, focal point here, coming into the pedestrian village, really trying to bring this to life. This is our mixed-use building in here. Then as we come out here towards 77, the brown building is a 7-story condo style, A1 and A2, or the Class A office. Coming back down Hambright into the orange buildings at the southwest portion of the site are commercial, highway commercials. That would be some drive-throughs to service all the building and the employment that is happening around here, some neighborhood services. The yellow throughout the core of the site is the walk-up multifamily. Again, our entrance coming in off Mount Holly, Huntersville, Access 5, terminating with that clubhouse, another nice terminal vista. The tan buildings up against 77 on the north end of the site, the townhomes, the orange buildings, C9, 10, and 11 are the light industrial flex, future home at Clutch, one of those. And then warehouse and storage on the north end of the site. Portion of that targeting small business, contractors, plumbers, electricians, that type of thing. And just some views. So this is coming in opposite that CAT station into the main entrance at Terminal Vista, hopefully a two-story, restaurant, outdoor dining, multifamily left and right. Example of one of those plazas we talked about, bringing the street to life. Looking back down that sort of mini Main Street area, restaurant, retail, office, two-story on the left, three-story on the right, running down into the buildings at the end. And there should have been, we ran out of some slides. Anyways, there were some additional renderings in there of some other portions of the site that would be available with the packet. But I hope you guys can see the attention to detail and stuff that we're putting into the project. It's something near and dear to us and something we intend to be involved with for a very long time. I should have also mentioned on the connectivity piece, we do have the blue line that runs north-south through the site. There's a pedestrian corridor funneling everybody down into that pedestrian village. And then the green line along Mount Holly, Huntersville, and all the way along Hambright is almost 3/4 of a mile of 10-foot multi-use path. So I guess that's what I had presentation-wise. There were a couple questions I think that were kind of open, targeted at me. If I can maybe address those first and then open up to any other further questions, would that be appropriate?
If I can just have you check a box for me, because I was remiss in doing so right when you got started. You give your full name and
Yeah.
record, and then Kristen, I'm sorry, if you can come back up. That was my fault, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow once you guys were going, so.
Ben Geisler, 20419 Shear Road, Davidson.
Thank you.
And Krista Mulkey, 2173 Hawkins, Charlotte, 28203.
Perfect, and if we could pretend I did that first, I'd appreciate it. Ben, sure, there was a couple open-ended questions, so feel free.
And I will say, if anybody's interested in seeing some visuals of some of the other portions of the site, I do have them on my iPad here, so I'd be happy to walk them around real quick. As far as we refer to it as a triangle, the 1 acre at the southeast corner site, Mr. Cruz's property. I've traded a number of texts with Mr. Cruz. I have met with him in person. I met across a driveway from him in person, attempting to show him our plans, and by that point in the process, he said, I don't need to see him. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. In a phone call, he shared that he's happy where he lives. Didn't buy it all that long ago. Indicated to me that why would he want to sell? It's only going to be worth more. And if he wants to move, he can move, and he can rent it for X dollars upstairs, so on and so forth. And he had his justification. I would love to acquire the property. Never got an opportunity to make him an offer on the property, so it's not that we're off on value or we're trying to squeeze him or anything like that. The neighboring property, they've reached out to him a couple times to say, hey man, you really ought to talk to these guys. Now's probably your time. Didn't really get anywhere. And then after the public hearing, another gentleman who lives just down the street on Hambright has a beautiful property. It was for sale. Reached out and said, hey, you ought to buy my place and get enough money out of the developer to buy my place, and it would be great for you. He said, no, thank you. I'm happy where I live. So I've not pressured him. I'm just letting him, my hope is maybe at some point in the future we will have the opportunity to acquire it. But he's content. He didn't come to the community meeting, didn't come to the public hearing, and isn't here this evening.
I guess, since you're willing to buy it, my worry is the town taking on any liability, right? We're allowing this development to go in next to his property. If for some reason he thinks his property value has gone down as a result of it, could the town be at fault in any way? But if you're willing to buy it, then I guess it doesn't really matter.
I'll look at the attorney and just say, no, we're not concerned about that.
On the parking deck question, just to clarify, I think Jesse, we got there, but it's just kind of a quirky thing with TODE and TODR. There is a maximum parking requirement in addition to a minimum parking requirement. So there's a moment in time where that parking deck gets built and we may be over the maximum on a per square foot basis based on the amount of commercial that we're putting in. And Greg, to answer your question, I would be crazy to build a parking deck, given the cost of a parking deck, and not do the office building next door. The building to the left of it, T1, we are planning on using the parking deck to service part of that building as well. So that's sort of where, in a timing perspective, if we have a good interested party in that building, we would want to be able to build a parking deck potentially for that building while we work on doing the office next door.
Can you elaborate on that moment in time? Are we talking 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years?
It's really hard to say. It would just be market driven. Again, it's probably very unlikely that we would do it that way. But it could also be in sequence from a phasing perspective. Technically speaking, if generally in these projects you build the parking deck first, then you come and build the building next door. So in that scenario, we build that parking deck, we are immediately in an over-parked situation, even if we are starting work on the office building next door.
If we're talking months or even a year, I'm fine. But I just wouldn't want a scenario where it would sit out there for 5 years, right? And you're like, well, we're just waiting on the office market to come back.
Yeah, it would be shooting ourselves in the foot financially to do that.
You had one slide, and I might have missed another one, where you broke out the percentages of the residential.
Yeah.
Do you have something similar for the commercial side?
I think it was actually on there. Yeah, so if you look, the blue areas are the commercial. So we have 3 acres dedicated to Class A office, 126,000 feet, 16 acres for industrial and warehouse, 172,000, 11 acres for neighborhood services at 121,000.
And retail would fall in that third category?
Yeah, retail restaurants would go into neighborhood services, drive-through, strip center, that stuff.
Okay, and then that's, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
so it doesn't, right or wrong, but that's, what is that, 10%? Or,
Of the overall project
Yeah.
acreage, it would be 15% of the overall
15?
project acreage. Yeah.
okay.
But it's fairly compact density-wise. So. Yeah, and that was a request of town staff. To create that pedestrian village feel, you want to have that stuff be compact.
Can you please talk a little more about the drive-through? I'm trying to wrap my head around how a drive-through in this area is going to work.
Let's see. All right, so the southwest corner of the site, buildings C4, C6, C7, C8, that's our highway commercial component there, which is at the corner of 2 major thoroughfares being Hambright and Mount Holly Huntersville Road. As you guys know, in Huntersville, you're not allowed to have a drive-through that comes along the side of the building or in front of the building. So building C7, that building would be fronting on Mount Holly Huntersville Road. The drive-through queuing you can see behind that, and that would be accessed by either Access 4 or Access 3. And then C4, and C7 would be more likely to be what I would consider a large footprint drive-through, like a Wendy's or Chick-fil-A, something along those lines. C4 would probably be more of a small footprint drive-through, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, something along those lines that would complement the CAT station. That building is fronting, sort of shows here fronting on the green area that is the Duke Power easement, and then a plaza out to the front, again with the queuing behind. And this is an area of the site that, as we've talked to area businesses and other area residents, particularly folks over in Brighton area and some of the people up at the park, are really kind of dying for some of this type stuff over here, particularly with the Statesville Road mixed-use project and the way that played out with Michael Jordan Racing kind of sucking up what would have been their commercial area. And then Beltway 77, all the square footage they're putting in there. We heard at the public hearing, we had 8 or 9 people speak positively about, and that was a kind of consistent theme. We want somewhere to go eat. We want somewhere to get our hair cut. We don't want to go all the way up to exit 25 or 23. We don't want to go to North Lake Mall.
Yeah, so our kids go to school on Hambright.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do any spirit nights or whatever, we have to go to 25, 23, or 18. So I'm not opposed to that. I just wasn't sure where that was going to fit in. And I mean, when I think Chick-fil-A, of course, I'm like, oh my God, the line.
So you see kind of the double.
Yeah, I
queuing
see
for
how it's got the
C7,
double.
and it
Yeah,
kind of
that's
pushes all that
helpful.
traffic internal to our site instead of pushing it out onto the street.
That's great. Thank you.
Ben, a couple questions. Going back to the residential units, have you determined for sale or for rent and percentage?
It'll be for rent.
All will be for rent, no
Yeah,
for sale.
except for potentially T1, that could be for sale or for rent. The condo style, the tan building at A1, A2, the top
So
of the
even,
traffic
so
circle.
even the townhomes would all be for rent?
Yes.
Okay. Status of the TIA, I know that, I think it's been reviewed by the state, it was in our staff report. They had a number of improvements.
Yep.
Any comment on that as far as we're going to?
No, I mean, we're generally on board with where they are. They're in the midst of, I think, their second review now. We didn't get any comments out of the first review. We've had a number of meetings with the district engineer, kind of hashed through most of the improvements. I'll also add, I'm big on knocking on doors and reaching out to neighbors. We did that as far as the neighbors in the project go, but we're also doing that reach out as it relates to Beltway 77, the project to the south. Kimley Horn is their engineer, so we're having a lot of dialogue with them. We're coordinating with them on some right-of-way issues and planning to work with them on construction. I've had conversations with the Statesville Road mixed-use developer on that same basis. We've had conversations, meeting with Blackburn Communities, who's responsible for some of those improvements over there, to try to coordinate all that.
One other one, you've kind of touched on plan phasing, and I'll tell you why I'm asking the question, you can answer it, is, will they be phasing? And my concern would be, that the market right now probably supports, or it did 6 months ago, a multifamily apartment community, that the apartment doesn't get built. And then I think the attraction for the community, I think, is the mixed-use element. So is there any commitment that, hey, we're going to, the first element's going to be the mixed use? Obviously, I know some of it's residential, but can you?
I mean, from a economic viability perspective, we do kind of need to put the rooftops in around to support that. But we're looking at simul-tracking those things. So for example, the M1 mixed-use buildings, that's part of the urban flats that are going in. And we'll require that developer to put that 8,000 square feet of commercial in there while they're building their rooftops. I think realistically, the way that it will develop is the walk-up multifamily will be the first component. Just from a timing perspective, they're probably the fastest to the table from that side. At the same time that we start on Clutch Studio, one of those C9 or C10 buildings. And then the urban flat piece will follow pretty shortly thereafter, not a lot of gap. Probably at the same time that C4 and C7 start to happen. And as soon as C9 or C10 is built out, C6 will become available from a commercial perspective. And in that same window, we would be looking at the pedestrian village. The office would probably be the last component, because to attract a really good office tenant, they want to see that activity, want somewhere for their employees to go to lunch, want somewhere for their employees to be. And to your point, there's really nowhere for them to be out there. So the office is likely to be the last component of the site.
Is the phasing to put in all the interior infrastructure from day one, or will that also be kind of phased? How would-
It'll be tied to the development pieces. So, for example, I think, but there's very little that's not tied because of the way the site lays out. So the public streets that run through the yellow portion of the site and exiting on the Mount Holly and exiting onto Hambright Road are going to be a requirement, because you need those to be able to service that walk-up multifamily piece. The short extension through the pedestrian village would happen shortly thereafter while we're building out U1, U2, U3, and M1. The piece that would probably be least important to have finished would be Public Road A between W1, W2, C10, C11. But I know our plans right now, we're already working with BHM on architecture for C11. Obviously, we have to have that road in. The hope is that we would be moving in that building sometime next summer or early fall. So that will happen. It'll all happen pretty darn close, but no more than really 3 sections.
Thank
No, I just wanted you to follow up on the traffic with Kimley Horn, just kind of talk about that level of service stuff and, what that's going to look like as far as volume of cars. And
Steve, you wanna come? So Steve Blakely is our traffic engineer with Kinley Horn, and is intimately involved in this area because he's done a number of projects, including Beltway 77 right now, which has been a big advantage for us.
Thank you. I'm Steve Blakely with Kimley Horn, 200 South Tryon Street, Suite 200, Charlotte 28202. So yes, another level of detail on the level of service element. The today, 2022 today, level of service is C, Charlie, for both the AM and PM peak. The resulting at the end of the day will be the D and the E, as we talked about. However, in the stacking, so to speak, of all these other developments you saw in the contextual graph that was here, all that traffic comes in between today and Town 1. So when those developments come online with their traffic and their improvements that's been already committed to, the levels of service of that intersection are D and E. So then we add on Town 1 traffic, and it's still D and E, but there's a number measurement in that, just like a report card, D is a range of numbers. So it still warrants a small element of improvement, even from the traffic that's added by Town 1, and that generates the lane addition that we're having at that particular intersection. So it still remains D and E, but it's D and E with or without Town 1 ever coming. So does that help? That make sense on the sort of the progression of how it builds upon other things contextually? Okay.
Wise, what does that look like compared to today? Is that twice the number of cars, 3 times the number of cars? Do you know those numbers off the top of your head?
No, we could add up the volumes entering the intersection if you want, and I could tell you that back, but it's really, and like I talked about in the public hearing, the biggest benefit that's going to come out of this is safety, and we don't have number measurements that go along with that, but as you know, there's no left turn lanes there today, and we talked about that during the public hearing, and that just creates all kinds of havoc for that intersection, not only for congestion, but stacking and the ability to get around and erratic maneuvers. I've been there several times waiting to go home on Helmbright, and a car will zip around on the right and bypass the queue illegally and cut back in. So, there's all kinds of safety benefits that come from that as well. That's just not measurable.
So, I don't think I've seen the improvements. So you guys have a slide that we can look at that with it in the packet?
I've got the stacking laneage.
It's in my appendix, but again, we're missing some slides out here, so no. Can you pull up in yours the
Yeah,
little arrow diagram?
I've got the laneage diagram.
Okay. Yeah, so this is it. Essentially, improvements clearly along Mount Holly Huntersville Road, the Helmbright intersection, and then from Helmbright basically to the interstate. That's going to complement some of the other improvements that are already planned for that section of roadway, including a traffic signal. So Beltway and Katz will now have a traffic signal that we'll share with our driveway to help everybody get in and out. And then on the east side of 77, there's going to be an addition of a second left turn lane northbound at Statesville to turn left onto Helmbright to get over to the interstate. Yes, yeah. Okay.
All right. Affordable housing. I got comment, question, and a request. But the comment, one of the comments first is for anybody listening, affordable housing is not low-income housing, and I'm not going to teach a class on what it is. Google it. But you've committed to providing 7 affordable housing units. The applicant has. And I remember, I didn't hear it a moment ago. I just want to ask, you were reserving some of those for law enforcement and firefighters?
Yeah, we had 4 of those units that are prioritized for foster families and foster kids. Those are the 4 that we're going to underwrite to 50% AMI as opposed to 80% AMI. And then we have 2 of those units that are being prioritized for Town of Huntersville first responders.
Okay. Well, and then the other thing, I want to commend you because, I mean, I've only been doing this for about 5 years, and Jack can tell me if he's had anybody else come in. You're the first one to come in with 7 affordable house units that I've seen. I would commend you on that. And what you just said, I mean, I have a retired brother, 42 years on law enforcement. Brother was a volunteer fighter. His son was a firefighter in a major urban city over in Tennessee. I was a soldier, but I was a teacher retired with 18 years. And I would request that you also consider in there somewhere, because if you can protect us, policemen and firemen, and you can teach our children, you should be able to afford to live in this town. So I would ask you to consider finding some way to add a teacher to your list.
I think that's something that we could talk to staff about, and if staff was comfortable with that, I think it's something that we'd be definitely open to exploring.
Piggyback question on the affordability. Just the mechanics of how this works. It's not it's all a rental community. So does this just, that $500,000 donation go into basically rent subsidies for the for-profit entity that owns and manages the complex?
So it would be, no, it would be rent subsidy. So the 80%, this way, the developers who end up owning the apartment buildings we would pass that 80% to them. So they would be locked in at providing 80% AMI affordable housing. The foundation would then subsidize that number down to 50%. So yes, there'd be basically a cash donation on an annual basis from Joey Logano Foundation to the developer of those apartments or the future owner of those apartments that would offset that down to 50%. And then we would work with a third party, like a Davidson Coalition, Davidson Housing Coalition or similar, to administer that. We would work with Children's Hope Alliance to vet families and kids, and then we would work with the town to vet first responders and or potentially teachers.
Fantastic. Thank you for doing that.
All right, any other questions for the applicant team? No? All right, do we have a motion on this?
I have one if everyone wants to sit down. This could be a while.
Just before I sit down, I do want to thank staff. I know Jack's not going to be with us that much longer, but we've been working on this project for we've been working on this project for almost 3 years internally, but spent probably 20 months now working with staff. Started back in COVID when we were Zooming, and we started the process with a blank sheet of paper and went to staff and said, here's conceptually some of the things we'd like to do here. How do you want us to do this? And literally did bubble diagrams on a Zoom meeting, January of 2022, and then really dug in with staff, starting to make things happen from there. And I think they challenged us for sure at certain points. Jesse was a valuable addition, but a late addition to the team. So when I say challenge, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And I think we challenged them some. It's been a pleasure working with them. Thank you.
In considering the proposed rezoning petition R2207, Town 1 Mixed Use Center, the Planning Board recommends approval, including requested modifications and subject to the following conditions. Modification request number 1, side yard parking. Allow side yard parking on lots 6, 7, 8, 13, 18, 19, which is subject to final staff review and approval. Additional screening shall be provided in accordance with sheet C5 of the rezoning plan. Modification request number 2, I-77 buffer disturbance. Allow up to a 20-foot buffer disturbance in the I-77 buffer for grading. including portion along Hambright Road, provided an alternative buffer yard plan is submitted in accordance with Section 7.5 of the ordinance. Modification request number 3, buffer reduction along Mount Holly, Huntersville Road. Allow buffer to be reduced to 60 feet, subject to screening and buffering, as shown in submitted plans. Modification request number 4, cul-de-sac distance. The distance between the cul-de-sac located in Public Road A and the right-of-way of Mount Holly, Huntersville Road may be increased to 380 feet. Modification number 5, massing requirements. Waive masking requirements for the building located on Lot 18. Modification number 6, vertical parking structure. Vertical parking may serve the TOD-E and TOD-R portions of the project, and parking may be completed prior to the completion of all the improvements such parking is intended to serve. Modification number 7, building facade requirements for building W2. No building entrance shall be required to be constructed on, and no sidewalk shall be required along the portion of building W2 that does not front on the cul-de-sac and driveway adjoining building W2, subject to staff approving detailed renderings of the architecture of the building frontage. Plus, all remaining staff comments and conditions and TIA comments are addressed. The proposal is consistent with the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan and specifically policies LU 1.1, 2, 5.1, 6.1, 7.1, 8.1, 8.3, EV 1.3, T 1.2, and T 1.3. I'm almost there. It is reasonable in the public interest to rezone the approximately 70.45 acres identified on the submitted plans, as it is consistent with the envisioned use and development patterns set forth in the 2040 Community Plan. The location of the proposed development can support the increased density due to the proximity to 2 major thoroughfares, a future Cats Park facility and ride, and I-77. The proposed rezoning plans meet the intent of the 4 districts requested and applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance, and together as one development plan in a cohesive manner. Tracy, I will email that to you.
Before we do a second, just a correction, I think. Oh, well, what I was going to say is just the acreage that you referenced, 70.54 versus 4.5.
That's my only mistake, I'll take it.
Can you read modification 2 again, just to make sure?
Modification request number 2, I-77 buffer disturbance. Allow up to a 20-foot buffer disturbance in the I-77 buffer for grading, including the portion along Hambright Road, provided an alternative buffer yard plan is submitted in accordance with Section 7.5 of the ordinance. Does that get us there?
Okay, I just wanted to make a correction on that. Do we have a second as written?
Second.
Okay. Now do we have discussion, amendments?
I have an amendment.
Okay.
I would request an amendment that you add, the planning board recommends that the town board request a review of Article 3.2.14.E.3, design provisions to determine if that specifically the wording of 7 stories or 82 foot high is whichever is higher. Is that to me, that's the end of the amendment.
I don't know if I follow, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know if just help me understand, you just.
Article 3.2.14.E3, that's the E is the design provision, and 3 is the portion that allows the height of the building at this site. It's ambiguous. maybe we want it to be ambiguous, but I think it needs to be discussed.
Meaning that it's either or, meaning that it's either 7 or 80 feet, the greater?
E3, that E3 be reviewed and discussed to determine if that is what the town really wants.
Are you getting back to what we talked about with Burkdale with?
No,
Okay.
no. I'm not.
Frank, that sounds though like
Am I-
you want them to do an ordinance review while we're at it.
Well, I'm asking them to look at that question right there, because the wording is notwithstanding the height restrictions of Article 4, building and lot types, new buildings in the transit-oriented employment district are limited to 7 stories or 80 feet in height, whichever is greater. Minimum height is 26, measured at the eave line. I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm not saying it's right, I'm saying I'm agreeing with it or disagree with it. But I find it ambiguous, and I'm asking, maybe they won't, maybe they will. I'm asking the town board to ask for a review of that paragraph, that article.
We could do that separately. Aside from, because you're asking about the code itself as opposed to this rezoning.
Well, as it
Susan
applies,
wrote it, actually.
as it applies
Brighton.
to all this, yes.
We're very comfortable, but we'll be happy to review that.
That's fine, Chad. That works for me too. Withdraw my amendment. Thank you, Jack.
Okay, any other discussion, modification? Chris, did you want to jump in now on that part?
That we were seeing that request too correctly. It's like, they don't want the disturbance to be more than 20 foot into the buffer, right?
Yeah.
That's what I hope I said, yes.
Scott, did you want to add?
Sure, I've got some
Your thoughts
comments.
on this?
Yeah, actually, I like the project. I love the project. I think that it is you look at the Duke Power transmission line that runs through it, I mean, it's a site that doesn't have challenges to it. So hats off to the team that were able to put this together. And I think maybe a public hearing, somebody used Kingsley down in Fort Mill, and I don't know if anybody's had a chance to be down there, look at it. It's a wonderful project, and I'd like to think we'll get something similar here. And I think what they did down there was almost more of a old mill theme, and I think what you all are going here for is more of a farmhouse. So I think it'd be wonderful for the community. And I think even the industrial element, I think it's removed enough, but it is a real need in our community. So again, I think, hats off to you guys and the staff for bringing us a plan that I think is awesome. That's it.
$500,000 a year in taxes come into the town from this project. That's a plus. 850 job total build out. That's a plus. The affordable housing, a plus. And then the next piece is just for discussion for people. I know there are people listening, and if they don't listen, they'll go. Yes, this building would be 7 stories, 110 feet, and a parking garage 7 feet. Forget everything happened in the past. I've always said that I'm not opposed to height. I support the downtown master plan where it limits height to four stories. That's fine. But anywhere else in town, if I see a site or a project that I think it's in the right place for the right purpose, I'm going to support it. This project is in the right place for the right purpose. Period.
I just want to say it's really refreshing to look at something that is supported by the community. It's really nice to be sitting here and, not having angry neighbors coming up here and talking to us. I really hope that you incorporate a market or grocery store type aspect to this, because having been somebody who didn't have a car in an urban setting, getting groceries on the bus is incredibly difficult. I did it, but it wasn't fun. And just having a little market within our building even that provided groceries if we needed butter or milk or rice. Having something small like that was a lifesaver some days. For us to ride the bus, it would have been 45 minutes to an hour. So I would strongly encourage you to consider that addition.
I'll simply say this during the public hearing. Ben had mentioned that this is truly mixed use. In its truest definition, though. There's some marketing spin to that phrase. And we see it, some sites have limitations where, yes, it is mixed use, but it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This has everything, seemingly, but doesn't look like it's just all been thrown, in a blob and whatever happens, happens. To have that level of variety and that level of application and to have it look cohesive is impressive. So thank you for bringing that to us. And I guess with that said, all right, if there's no more discussion, let's take a vote on this. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Congratulations, guys. All right. That brings us to other business, of which we have none. So now we come to our least favorite part.
Motion to adjourn.
Yep, there it is.
Second.
All right, did that get seconded? I'm sorry, I was laughing, yes. All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, none opposed. We are done, folks. Thank you very much.